Welcome and thank you for tuning into A Sound Constitution at CHLY 101.7 FM with Cassandra, Sam, Karla, Kelly, Max, and Harris. We're fourth-year Bachelor of Science in Nursing students at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo. We're working to demystify healthcare issues affecting our community, bringing you evidence-based information about our healthcare. This information is for education purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare provider.
We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Nanaimo people, with a broadcasting range that overlaps the Kuwatsan and the Sliaman territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Nanaimo people and with the intention to increase awareness about truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding Nanaimo history, reconciliation, protocol, and land acknowledgement can be found on our Facebook and YouTube pages.
Your brain is a magnificent, miraculous machine, the most supercharged computer that you have ever seen. Protected by your cranium, it hides between your ears, the stem, the cerebellum, and cerebral hemispheres. Your brain is sending and receiving. Your brain, the information that you're needing. Your brain, it has a lot to do. It's a crazy multitasker that works overtime for you. Part of the nervous system, it makes your body move. Contains all of your memories, it helps you think things through. Controls all of your senses, but it's still a mystery, 'cause scientists keep finding out new discoveries. Your brain, it only weighs 3 pounds. Your brain, the smartest thing around. Your brain, a miraculous machine, the most supercharged computer the world has ever seen.
And that little jingle was called Brain, Brain, Brain by the Storybots. Welcome all you fine people out there tuning into CHLY 101.7 FM radio. I hope everyone's enjoying their day and are as excited about the next 60 minutes as I am. You're listening to VIU's fourth year BSN nursing students with the Sound Constitution. I am Cassandra, your host for the day, and helping me run the show, we have Karla. This week, we're diving into the deep, dark depths of the human brain, the key component to our body's neurovascular system and all life-sustaining processes. Pretty mind-blowing, no pun intended, to think of everything the brain does in order to maintain proper bodily functions and homeostasis, which is maintaining balance between all 11 of our body systems. Essentially, our brain helps to maintain our body's life-preserving and life-sustaining processes by means of balance between every function in our body, from how and why and when our heart beats, to our body's ability to reproduce a human life, and everything in between. It is an intriguing concept to ponder how much we actually know about the brain and how much we've yet to understand. On that note, I thought it would be really fun to kick off today's episode with 5 fun facts about the human brain. All this information was gathered from an article written by Diana Wells in 2017. She's one author among many that are based out of the USA and are part of the Healthline website. This website's designed to provide individuals with clear, evidence-based healthcare information and resources on health and wellness topics that are current and factual to us today. I found this website to be full of great healthcare resources and current world health news, so be sure to check it out after the show and take a peek at their website at www.healthline.com. So, 5 facts about the human brain brought to you by Healthline, written by Diana Wells. Fact number 1, did you know our brain is made up of 75% water? So, keeping hydrated is so important as dehydration can lead to negative effects on our brain functioning. Fact number 2, our brains don't actually feel pain. They interpret pain signals that are sent to it from our peripheral nervous system, such as signals coming from your baby toe after you stub it on the foot of your bed. Fact number 3, the human brain contains roughly 100 billion neurons. It's a lot of neurons. As we're going to hear from Karla a little bit more on what a neuron is, but that is what makes up all our brain connectivity and memories and emotions is from all neurons connecting with each other. We're going to dive into that a little bit more later on in the show. Fact number 4, information running between these neurons, which is called synapse, move at various speeds depending on the intensity of the external stimuli. And it occurs in our brain for everything we see, think, or do. The fastest speed for information to pass between neurons has been recorded as approximately 250 miles per hour. Pretty interesting. Fact number 5, this is something that I've always wanted to know about, is the brain freeze. So, a brain freeze is actually caused by the blood vessels in the back of the throat and the ones that are actually leading up to the brain to constrict. This constriction occurs because whatever you're eating or drinking that is cold, our body is responding to that by constricting blood vessels, leading to the brain freeze pain we all know so well. Then as the blood vessels warm up, they start to dilate and the pain subsides. So, there are some fun facts brought to you by Healthline, written by Diana Wells. Be sure to check out their website, www.healthline.com. If you are just tuning in, this is Cassandra, your host for the day on A Sound Constitution with CHLY 101.7 FM radio. Your fourth year BSN nursing students bringing you some healthcare topics, and today we're talking about the human brain and the nervous system. Carrying on our episode, I've got Karla diving in a little bit more into the neurological system and how the brain functions. Take it away, Karla.
A human's nervous system is a marvel of creation. It works much like a computer to capture sensory information from our environment, filter and process this into meaningful stimuli, and respond to it with both voluntary and involuntary bodily functions. It is divided into 2 major anatomical systems: the central nervous system, made of the brain and the spine, and the peripheral nervous system, made of complex systems of nerves and supporting cells. These nerves connect our brain and spine to sensory organs, such as eyes or ears, and tiny nerve endings scattered throughout the body that gather important information from our physical environment, like temperature, pressure, light, and sound. If you were to take off your skull and peer inside, the brain would look unremarkable, much like a gray spongy mass or cauliflower. And yet it contains enough densely packed neurons, blood vessels, and supporting cells to stretch end-to-end over 90,000 miles. Thought impulse and nerve transmission is conducted rapidly along these neural highways in a complex exchange of biochemicals and changing electrical potentials. In addition to receiving information from the physical senses, the nervous system is responsible for many higher functions that make us uniquely human, such as storing and recovering memories, experiencing emotions, and generating creative intelligence such as humor, empathy, music, art, and abstract thought. Researchers are still working to understand how the nervous system grows and develops. The brain begins forming in a human embryo sometime between 3 to 4 weeks after conception, with the first nerve impulses transmitting shortly after. By about 12 weeks, the nervous system in a fetus is fully formed. It continues to grow and develop extensively throughout the pregnancy, but is most vulnerable during these first 3 months to harmful environmental factors such as drugs, alcohol, environmental toxins, or intense emotional stress that the mother might be exposed to. After birth, a baby's brain will grow the most during its first 5 years. It will continue to grow through adolescence into young adulthood in a complex process of shaping and pruning excess neurons and refining patterns of thought until roughly the age of 25. I would like to introduce you to Molly Wright from Queensland, Australia, who at the age of 7 is one of the youngest presenters on TED Talks. Breaking down the research-backed ways parents and caregivers can support children's healthy brain development, Wright highlights the benefits of play on lifelong learning, behavior and well-being, sharing effective strategies to help all kids thrive by the age of 5. She's joined on stage by 1-year-old Ari and his dad Amarjot, who help illustrate her big ideas about brain science. This TED Talk was produced in collaboration with the Minderdu Foundation as an educational tool for parents and caregivers around the world and is supported by UNICEF.
Hi, it's Elise Hugh. You're listening to TED Talks Daily. I have seen a lot of TED Talks as host of this show, so I have some authority when I say that today's speaker really blew me away, and she's not even in the third grade. In her 2021 talk, 7-year-old Molly Wright breaks down the research-backed ways parents can play with children to set them up with skills they'll need for the rest of their lives. She's joined on stage by her neighbors, 1-year-old baby Ari and his dad, Amajot, who helps illustrate her big ideas about brain science. This TED Talk was produced in collaboration with the Minderdu Foundation and the UN as an educational tool for new parents around the world.
What if I was to tell you that a game of peekaboo could change the world? Sounds impossible, right? Well, I'm here today to prove it's not. Hi, I'm Molly, and I'm 7, and this is my little friend Ari. Say hi, Ari. Hi. Oh, and this is my neighbour, Amajot. My talk today is about some powerful things you grown-ups can do that shape us as children and the adults we become. How do I know? Because my parents and people around me did them, early and often. I know not all kids are as lucky. Some of my friends, some kids at my school, and many around the world. And I would really like to help change that. Thanks to scientists, we now know just how important the first 5 years are for our health and development, especially our brains. Ari started learning long before he was even born, from inside his mummy's tummy. When Ari was born, he was tiny, and he cried all the time. He was always hungry, and he pooped a lot. Now, he laughs and giggles and makes funny noises. But those are just the changes we hear and see. There's way more going on inside. So, let's talk more about our brains. By my age, it's almost 90% the volume of an adult brain. Our brains develop faster in our early years than at any other time in our lives. It can create up to 1 million neural connections every second. But we need your help. Our healthy development depends on these top 5 things. 1, connecting. 2, talking. 3, playing. 4, a healthy home. 5, community. All of this helps our brains and us reach our full potential. So what's something you can do that can really make a difference? Connect, talk, and play with us. And here's the really big news. Amajot, Ari, you ready?
Ready?
Copycat games build imagination and empathy.
And?
Naming games build vocabulary and attention.
Is it Daddy? Ari! Daddy? Ari!
And games like peekaboo, yep, peekaboo, actually build memory and trust. Each time you talk to us, play with us, make us laugh, it not only builds and strengthens our relationships and mental health, it actually teaches us some of the most important life skills. From making friends, to taking a test, to getting a job, to one day maybe even starting a family of our own. Interactions early and often matter. Take it from me, the 7-year-old up here, talking about brain science. Okay, now, I know it's important for adults to use their devices sometimes, but kids are hardwired to seek out meaningful connections. Not receiving them causes confusion and stress. The positive relationships with the grown-ups in our lives gives kids the confidence we need to try new things, to explore, and be a kid. So please try remember The most special period for our development is the first 5 years, starting from inside Mummy's tummy. Please give it up for Amachot and Ari. Every moment together is an opportunity to connect, talk, and play. Imagine the difference we could make if everyone everywhere did this. To us, to children, it's so much more than just a game. It's our future. Thank you.
You've been listening to Molly Wright, a student from Queensland, Australia. She is a passionate advocate for early childhood development. At just 7 years old, she's one of the youngest people ever to give a TED Talk. The previous TED Talk was sharing effective strategies to help all kids thrive by the age of 5. It was produced in collaboration with the Mildred Foundation and is supported by UNICEF. Hey, Brain Buffs! If you're listening to this Sound Constitution episode on the nervous system, you are probably also interested in psychology. Pretty cool that brains and psychology go together. Before we get into our next section, I would like to tell you about a source of cool books that can feed your brain. Check out the BC Campus online textbook platform, where BC people can get some pretty cool books and study guides all for free. Check out pressbooks.bccampus.ca and search up topics that interest you. There's a wide variety that can make your brain smarter. For example, in the Introduction to Psychology textbook, there was this quiz. See how many you can get right. Let's turn now to our host, Cassandra.
Thank you, Carla. If you are just tuning in to CHLY 101.7 FM radio, you are listening to another episode on A Sound Constitution. I am your 4th year BSN student host, Cassandra, here at VIU, and we just heard from my co-host and peer, Carla. She gave us a quick overview of the neurological system and the human brain, as well as some other resources to check out on campus if you are at all interested in learning more about psychology and the human brain. Because this is such a complex organ, we at A Sound Constitution felt this next audio clip was just what we needed to further expand on the vast processes the brain is responsible for. To do this, we have an educational clip from TopThink. TopThink is a YouTube channel that has been recently developed to talk about health, science, nature, and much, much more. The specific clip I'm about to play is called 12 Shocking Facts About the Human Brain, and was posted onto TopThink's YouTube channel in November of 2019. Their research and information has been gathered from various medical, science, and educational resources that are current and credible to today's knowledge. So without further ado, here is 12 shocking facts about the human brain.
Today, we're going to learn about 12 shocking facts about the human brain. Now let's begin. Number 1, intellectual peaks. Your brain stops growing when you're 25, but that doesn't mean you've reached your intellectual peak. Cognitive change is a lifelong process. Some skills, like memory and processing speed, max out in your mid-20s. You'll excel at facial recognition and problem-solving in your 30s, and then gain emotional control and empathy in your 40s and 50s. A select few skills, like vocabulary, take even longer, peaking in your 60s and 70s. Now, your brain may have matured, but your mind has plenty of room to grow. That's why you should never stop learning, no matter how old you get. Number 2, Audible Sights. Have you ever heard that missing one of your senses amplifies the others? Going blind or losing your hearing won't make you a superhero, but it can give you a few different neurological advantages. A 2011 study found that people who are born blind sometimes develop a new way to process the world around them. They essentially begin seeing through their ears. The human brain excels at adapting to difficult situations. This kind of reorganization is called neuroplasticity. So when someone can't see, the brain automatically searches for an innovative solution. It will often rewire itself to process auditory information over visual information. It isn't quite the same as normal vision, But this workaround can yield some pretty amazing results. Number 3. Hogging blood. The average person's brain weighs about 3 pounds. Now, for someone who weighs 150 pounds total, that's only 2% of their body weight. That's barely anything when you think about how important the brain is to your body. But without it, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't think, you couldn't speak. No, you couldn't even move. So how does such a small organ manage so many executive functions? The real difference between the brain and the rest of the body isn't in its size. It's the amount of oxygen and blood that your brain needs to work like it's supposed to. So even though it's only 2% of your weight, it requires about 20% of your body's supply of oxygen. That's more than all of your other skeletal muscles combined. So if you've ever wondered how blood is distributed inside your body, now you know the brain is taking a significant chunk. Yeah, it's a blood hog. Number 4. Miles of blood vessels. Since it needs so much blood, an intricate network of vessels is working around the clock to bring oxygen to every part of the brain. Because if one section isn't getting enough blood, you start losing basic functions. Some people experience blindness or fatigue. Others lose all feeling in one or more parts of their body, almost like they're paralyzed. So, how many blood vessels does it take to keep your brain up and running? Well, to know for sure, you'd have to untangle a web of veins, arteries, and capillaries. You'd see that the average person has hundreds of miles of blood vessels inside their head. Yeah, I know that doesn't seem possible, does it? Your blood vessels are just so thin and tightly woven together that they fit inside a much smaller space. Now, researchers are still working on counting the number of blood vessels in your brain. We do, however, know that the entire body measures up to 100,000 miles. What? That's like driving around the widest part of the Earth 4 times. And those are the blood vessels of just one average-sized person. Imagine how much distance the entire human race could cover. Number 5. Brain starvation. So what happens when your brain doesn't get any oxygen at all? How long can it last before something goes wrong? The answer is not very long. After 5 to 6 minutes without oxygen, you're risking significant brain damage. That's because your brain can't actually store any oxygen on its own. It relies on the body to send a constant supply all day, every day. And if that stops happening, your brain only has a few minutes left to live. Number 6. Neural speedway. Every action in the brain starts with an electrical signal. Some are sluggish and slow. Others race across the brain, clocking in at over 230 miles per hour. Whoa! The speed of a signal depends primarily on what kind of signal it is. When you touch a hot surface, for example, that sensation speeds through your body. It starts at the sensory receptors on your hand, passes through your spinal cord, and then enters your cerebral cortex. There, you perceive and process how hot the surface is, which sends a new electrical signal rushing through your brain and your body. So if you've ever wondered why it takes a second to realize how hot something is, you found your answer. Number 7. Thousands of thoughts. You spend the majority of the day thinking. You wonder if anyone has noticed the stain on your shirt. You think about whether or not you locked your car. So many random thoughts pop into your head all day long, but has anyone ever tried to count them? Researchers go back and forth on the exact number, but most agree the average person has about 50,000 thoughts every single day. That's at least 2,100 thoughts per hour. Yeah, most are small and repetitive, but it just goes to show your brain never stops working. Number 8. Shrinking brains. Who do you think has a larger brain? Modern humans or our early ancestors? This discovery surprised researchers around the world. It turns out our 10,000-year-old ancestors had larger brains than we do. About 10% larger to be exact. But it's not because they were necessarily smarter than us. Several neuroscientists have explained this change in brain size. our brains are getting smaller because our bodies are too. So that means we have a smaller nervous system, so we can afford to carry a lighter, more efficient brain than our ancestors. There are plenty of times when smaller brains outperform larger ones. Instant computations are a great example. We may not have as much room to store information, but our processing speed is through the roof. When you think about it, our brains have gotten smaller to adapt to our modern lives. If we really needed bigger brains, well, we'd still have them. Number 9. The fattiest organ. Your brain is actually the fattiest organ in your entire body, right, fathead? Think about the construction of the human brain. Are you picturing the hundreds of millions of neurons, the complicated network of blood vessels, the dozens of glands secreting all kinds of hormones? But did you know that 60% of your brain is just plain old fat? Despite being one of the largest organs in the body, the brain doesn't have any muscle. It controls muscles, and a whole lot of them, but it's made of fatty tissue. Here's the problem. Your body makes a lot of different things, but fat isn't one of them. So all the fat your brain uses for performance and repair has to come from the food you eat. This is why so many dietitians push people to consume large amounts of omega-3 fatty acids. Now, those important fats facilitate brain development, stave off disease, and preserve your mental health. So do your brain a favor and work a little more fish into your diet. Number 10. Synchronized brains. Countless studies have shown the extraordinary ways that music interacts with the human brain. It evokes emotions, recalls memories, improves creativity and problem solving. But a German study discovered that music could actually synchronize brain functions. To test this out, they scanned the brains of 2 musicians while they played music together. And sure enough, the music slowly but surely synchronized their brain waves. It's very possible that the best bands sound so good together because their brains are working in tandem. Number 11. First brain surgeries. If you had to guess, when would you say the first brain surgery was ever conducted? The surgical world made its first real bit of progress in the late 18th century. Yeah, you'd think the first brain surgery happened somewhere around then, right? After all, brain surgery is one of the most complicated and volatile kinds of surgery there is. Just one little slip-up could completely ruin your patient's life. A tiny cut could steal away their speech or change their entire personality. Well, surprisingly, the first brain surgery happened during the Stone Age. Yeah, over 5,000 years ago, early humans were doing something called trepanation. It's when you remove a bone from someone's skull. Archaeologists have already found dozens of examples of this ancient surgical technique. Chances are it wasn't all that safe or effective, but these people were still performing surgery before things like math or written language ever existed. Number 12. 5-year-old's brain. The brain develops in a pretty strange way. When you're born, it's about 1/4 of the size of an adult brain. That's pretty big considering how small an infant actually is. But as we all know, there's a lot of things a baby can't quite get their heads around. That's because their quarter-sized brain is primarily focused on keeping them alive. It handles automatic processes like making your heart beat and helping your lungs breathe. Now, you'd expect your brain to keep growing at a steady pace, right? That way, by the time you get to turn, say, 25, it would be full-grown. But that isn't how your brain works. It actually doubles in size during the first year of life, and by 3 years old, your brain is almost 80% of an adult brain. That number jumps up to 90% by the age of 5. During those crucial years, your brain is forming millions of new synapses every single second. It's learning everything from symbol recognition to behavioral habits, which are important functions that you'll need later in life. So the next time you're talking to a 5-year-old, try to remember that their brain is almost as big as yours.
If you are just tuning in to CHLY 101.7 FM, this is Cassandra, your fourth year BSN host on VIU's very own radio station, A Sound Constitution. We just finished hearing some pretty amazing facts about the human brain on a YouTube clip called 12 Shocking Facts About the Human Brain, brought to you by TopThink. TopThink is an educational YouTube channel that discusses health and science-related topics and aims to spread factual education and awareness throughout our communities. What really stood out for me, both in this clip as well as what Karla was discussing earlier, that by the time a child reaches the age of 5, their brain has already developed and grown into 80% of an adult's brain. This really instills the importance of what our children are and are not exposed to, especially during the younger, most active developmental stages of a child's life. By exposing children to safe environments and trusting relationships, we can influence and promote healthy brain development throughout our communities. But what does that look like? One Canadian website called Caring for Kids has done extensive work to help us answer these questions. They gathered their information and research by interviewing pediatric physicians across Canada for the sole purpose of better understanding how we can promote early childhood brain development. And according to their research findings, nurturing positive experiences, fun activities and crafts, healthy foods and a balanced diet, community connections, and regular health care are some of the best ways parents and caregivers can support their children's brain development. Caring for Kids also states that just being with your children and helping them to learn and experience the world around them is a foundational aspect to healthy brain development. Be sure to stay tuned because near the end of this episode on A Sound Constitution, we are going to be diving into a bit more detail on how we as individuals at any age can maintain and promote our brain health. But before we do that, I want to bring in another expert perspective of how the brain functions together, from how the various regions of the brain communicate to how our body consciously and subconsciously communicates to these regions in the brain. This audio clip I'm going to be playing is called 3 Brain Systems That Control Your Behavior: Reptilian, Limbic, Neocortex by Robert Sapolsky, a professor of biology and neurology at Stanford University and a research associate with the Institute of Primate Research, National Museum of Kenya. This informative discussion is posted onto Big Think's YouTube channel. Big Think is an amazing resource with expert-driven, actionable, and educational content. Their goal is to get actionable lessons, quote-unquote, from the world's greatest thinkers and doers, and are striving to help communities explore what big ideas and core skills define 21st century knowledge. I really enjoyed everything Robert had to say throughout this clip and felt it was a great way to tie what we've learned and talked about thus far on the episode together. So let's get to it. Here is the brain systems that control your behavior: Reptilian, Limbic, Neocortex, with Robert Sapolsky.
What's the best way to think about the brain? It's insanely complicated. Everything connects to everything, a gazillion little subregions. Amid all that complexity, there's a broadly sort of simplifying way to sort of think about aspects of brain function when it comes to behavior. And this was an idea put forth by this guy, Paul MacLean, a grand poobah in the field, conceptually of thinking of the brain as coming in 3 functional layers: the triune brain. And again, this is highly schematic. The brain really doesn't come in 3 layers, but one can think of the firstmost, the bottommost, the most ancient as being what's often termed the reptilian brain, where basically the parts in there, we've got the same wiring as in a lizard, as in any ancient creature. It's been there forever, ancient wiring at the base of the brain, most inside. And what does that region do? All the regulatory stuff. Your body temperature changes, it senses it and causes you to sweat or shiver. It's monitoring your blood glucose levels. It's like releasing hormones that are essential to sort of everyday shopkeeping. It's just, keeping regulatory stuff in balance. Sitting on top of that is conceptually what could be termed the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. And this is very much a mammalian specialty. Lizards are not well known for their emotional lives. Part of the brain having to do with fear, arousal, anxiety, sexual longings, all those sorts of things. Very mammalian. You're off there in the grasslands, butting heads with somebody else with antlers, and it's your limbic system that's heavily involved in that. Then sitting on the top is the layer 3, the cortex. The cortex, spanking new, most recently evolved part of the brain. Everybody's got a little bit of cortex, but it's not till you get to primates that you got tons, and then apes, and then us. So functionally, it's very easy to think of this simplistic flow of commands. Layer 2, the limbic system, can make layer 1, the reptilian brain, activate. When is that? Your heart speeds faster, not because of a regulatory reptilian thing, ooh, you've been cut, something painful, but oh, an emotional state. You're a wildebeest and there's some scary, menacing wildebeest threatening you and your and that emotional state causes your limbic system to activate the reptilian brain, and your heart beats faster. You have a stress response, not because a regulatory change happened in your body, but for an emotional reason. Then it's very easy to think of layered on top, this cortical area commanding your second layer, your limbic system, to have an emotional response. Rather than something emotional, here's a threatening beast right in front of you, something emotional, you see a movie that's emotionally upsetting. See a movie. These are not real characters, they're pixels, and it's your cortex that's turning that abstract cognitive state into an emotional response. Likewise, your cortex, layer 3, could influence events down in layer 1. You see something upsetting, you think about something, you think about mortality. One of these days my heart is going to stop beating and your heart's going to beat faster. You're not bleeding and hypotensive, you're not in some hypoglycemia. Nothing in the reptilian brain could make sense of this. A purely cognitive state, ooh, on the other side of the planet there are people undergoing some traumatic event and I feel upset about it, and your reptilian brain responds. So it's very easy given that to think of a 3 talks to 2 talks to 1 sort of scenario. Just as readily though, 1 talks to 2 talks to 3. What would be a case of that? What's your reptilian brain talking to your cortex? Remarkable finding, when we're hungry, we make harsher moral judgments about people's transgressions. We're less charitable. We cheat more in economic games. Our cortex assessing the effects of pro-sociality, anti-sociality, and altruism and its evolution, and part of what it's doing in deciding how it feels about somebody else's plight is if your stomach's gurgling, if you're hungry, if you're in pain, that affects very cortical judgment type areas. Layer 1, this ancient reptilian brain that should have nothing to do with how your cortex works, having tons to do with it. Or layer 2, influencing layer 3, your limbic system, your emotional state, influence your abstract cognitive processes. What's the most obvious example of it? When we're under stress, when we're in an emotionally aroused state, we make stupid, impulsive decisions that seem brilliant at the time. Affective, emotional, limbic layer 2, influencing how your cortical cortex goes about its abstractions. It's not that abstract. It's embedded in the biology of all these layers. This interaction between these layers, seems this very mechanical process, potentially even an unconscious one. How do we consciously have, say, our cortex regulate an emotion, a limbic 2 layer? Simple. Think about the most arousing, wonderful thing that ever happened to you umpteen decades ago, and your cortex is evoking a memory that's got your limbic system humming along in some excited state. Or think cortically, or pull out the memories of some traumatic event, and your limbic system is responding. How about reptilian level? Easy to make it get into an agitated state. Sit there and think about something incredibly upsetting. Think about some memory that was truly disturbing. Think about mortality. Think about global warming. And your heart speeds up. Layer 3, in a very conscious way, has mobilized layer 1. A lot harder is the inverse. You're sitting there and you suffer from high blood pressure, and either they could marinate you in antihypertensive drugs for the rest of your life, or an alternative approach, a biofeedback approach, is sit there and think about the happiest day of your life. Think about being in an open field that's beautiful. Think about your favorite vacation. Think about, and if it's the right thinking about, suddenly your heart slows down. Suddenly your blood pressure goes down. The core of biofeedback is figuring out what sort of conscious states you can evoke that will affect your reptilian brain in a direction that's good for your health. And all you do then is learn how to get better and better in some stressed, hypertensive circumstance. What conscious, active thinking can I mobilize here at this point that will cause changes in how my big toe's blood flow is working? In a case like that, that is very conscious regulation of more autonomic, more ancient parts of your brain.
If you're just tuning in to CHLY 101.7 FM radio, Cassandra here, your host for today's episode, brought to you by VIU's very own campus radio show, A Sound Constitution. Over the last 40 minutes, we have been diving into the human brain, the driving force of our body's nervous system. We just finished hearing from Robert Sapolsky, who presented a very interesting educational discussion called 3 Brain Systems That Control Your Behavior, Reptilian, Limbic, and Neocortex. This educational discussion can be found on Big Think's YouTube channel, along with many other resources and educational videos that are driven by interprofessional collaboration, research, and evidence-based content. With Robert's background in biology and neuroscience on top of his involvement in primate research in Kenya's National Museum, he brings a very unique and evidence-driven perspective that helps him to not only tie how our brains function together, but he also challenges what we know and what we have yet to learn about the human brain. This discussion really helped to see how the regions of our brain work as one, yet contrast drastically in how they function. I truly value what Richard is bringing to the table because he helps us to understand the key roles each brain system, quote unquote, is in charge of. The neocortex, for one, is our most outer region of our brain, which is basically our voice of reason, and helps us interpret our thoughts, emotions, and actions. The limbic system, the control center of our emotions, and our reptilian region of our brain, the most inner or primitive part of our brain, which Robert explained is in control of our body's life-sustaining functions that can be found in any living species known to humankind. A part of the human brain in control that are outside of our conscious awareness. This audio clip really points out how these various regions work together to support our bodies, with the pathways and the tools to learn, understand, grow, and develop. A lasting thought I'm left with is the possibility of our brains expanding our ability to become consciously aware of how to control these life-sustaining functions, so much so that we can tap into the control center of our brains and alter physiological processes in the human body. And as this audio points out, we can already do these things such as meditation that has been proven to slow our body's heart rate and stress response. So, what else are we, or should I say, our brains capable of? Again, this audio clip is brought to you by Robert Sapolsky in collaboration with Big Think. Check out their YouTube channel. There's a ton of great resources and discussions surrounding health and science from leading experts in their fields. This brings us to the next segment of our show. Now that we've talked about how our brain functions and the importance of healthy brain development at a young age, we can now expand a bit further on what factors can affect the health and development of our brains, as well as how these risk factors may contribute to individuals developing mental health challenges. One 2020 article, medically reviewed by Smitha Bhandari, an MD out of the USA, states that there are biological, physiological, and environmental factors that can contribute to the cause of a mental illness. This article, found on WebMD's website, which is a Canadian website used for medical educational purposes, identifies key physiological factors for an individual at any age to develop a mental illness. These factors include severe psychological trauma suffered as a child, such as emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, losing a close loved one, neglect, or a poor ability to relate and connect with others. This article further states that environmental factors such as a dysfunctional family, substance abuse, or feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, anger, or loneliness can also be contributing factors to disrupting brain development and future mental health challenges. One burning question that comes up for me, and has for some time now, both as a student nurse and as a parent, how is our brain and mental health affected by electronic devices and excessive internet use? Whether we like it or not, screens and internet platforms are a huge part of psychosocial interactions today and are essentially integrated throughout communities and nations around the world. Because of this, it is of the utmost importance we come to understand how to promote our health and well-being in parallel with technological advancement. A 2019 International Journal article of mental health and addiction called Effects of Excess Screen Time on Neurodevelopment, Learning, Memory, Mental Health, and Neurodegeneration is going to help us open up this question. This article suggests that excessive screen time increases, quote, the risk of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional disorders in adolescents and young adults. Furthermore, they state that excessive screen time has the potential to increase the risk of early onset dementia in late adulthood. Through research, this journal article was able to quantitatively compare the mental health and well-being of generations prior to the big technological bang in the 80s with those born in the 80s and 90s. Their research identified a significant increase in psychological distress leading to suicidal ideation in generations born in the 80s and 90s, suggesting that excessive use of social media platforms can lead to lower self-esteem and increase the risk of internet addiction, leading to mental health challenges such as anxiety and depression. Their research suggests that earlier and longer exposure to technology and screens on a regular basis is correlated with an increased risk of psychiatric health challenges, such as hyperactivity, anxiety, and concentration difficulties. Although technology and screen time poses risk factors to the developing brain, there are findings that show how technology, when implemented with healthy boundaries and intention, can actually assist in brain development, such as increasing vocabulary and expressive language performance. This really emphasizing the absolute need for us as individuals and collectively as a community to become educated and aware of the factors that can influence and factors that can hinder our brain health and development. If you're just tuning in to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM, I am Cassandra, your host for today, and we just talked about some important factors to consider in regards to healthy childhood brain development and the use of electronic devices. Now that we've come this far and understood more about the functions and developmental factors of the human brain, as well as identifying some risk factors that can contribute to disturbances in healthy brain development, it seems only fitting to discuss how the brain changes with the presence of a mental illness. One biological science curriculum study done by the National Institute of Health in 2007 defines mental illness as a condition that changes a person's thinking, feelings, or behavior, and in some cases all three, and causes an individual to experience distress and difficulty functioning or completing everyday tasks. As pointed out in the peer-reviewed article by the National Institute of Health, scientists understand mental illnesses are associated with changes in the brain's neurochemicals, which are the brain's chemical messengers between the neurons that help create synapses and the firing of neural activity. This neural activity has the ability to actually change the way our brains function by rewiring neurons and the connection between them two, which is actually an example of our brain's neuroplasticity. This article uses the example of neurotransmitters or chemical messengers between neurons in our brain, serotonin. They state that serotonin levels are much lower in individuals who are suffering from depression. The decrease in serotonin levels not only causes mental health challenges, such as depression, but can actually exacerbate these challenges by rewiring our brain's neural connectivity. And one of the ways these health challenges are treated and cared for is through various pharmacological medications, such as SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. This specific classification of drug works on the brain by blocking receptor sites that send signals to bring serotonin back into neurons of the brain. What this means is that there is an increased level of serotonin neurotransmitters left outside of the neurons in the brain, which actually elicits the therapeutic effect of SSRIs to the individual that's experiencing the depression due to the increased levels of serotonin circulating throughout the brain. To finish off today's episode with a sound constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM, I want to play one last clip to pose a thought and challenge our perceptions on the use of psychedelic drugs to treat mental illness. This clip can be found at timemagazine.com and is called Michael Pollan on the Healing Power of Psychedelics, which was posted on Time's website and YouTube on May of 2018. This is an area that I find really fascinating, as I feel there is much more research needed on mental illness and what treatments can be possible. This video really blows those doors wide open with the potential of psychedelics helping us reach a higher level of healthcare for individuals and our communities throughout our country. Here's Michael Pollan with the healing power of psychedelics.
I guess the biggest misconception people have about psychedelics is that these are drugs that make you crazy. And we now have evidence that that does happen sometimes, but in many more cases, these are drugs that can make you sane. Psychedelic drugs of one kind or another have been used by different societies for thousands of years. If you compare mental health care with any other branch of medicine, infectious disease, cardiology, oncology, there have been very few achievements. Mental health treatment has not lengthen the human lifespan. So we need some new thinking. We need some new ideas, and psychedelics may well be that new idea. There's a really exciting field of research underway right now looking at psychedelics, especially psilocybin, the ingredient in magic mushrooms, to help people deal with mental illness of various kinds. Addiction, depression, obsession, and the fear and anxiety that surrounds a terminal diagnosis. And the feeling among the scientists is that these chemicals allow us to essentially reboot the brain. All those kind of deep grooves that lock us into patterns of both thought and behavior are dissolved and temporarily suspended in a way that allows us to break those patterns. We're now in a different world. The adults now, many of them have experience of psychedelics. They're not going to react in such a panicky way, I don't think. Many of the people in charge of our institutions, probably regulators at the FDA, people at the American Psychiatric Association, they have personal experience of psychedelics, and they're, I think, going to bring a more rational attitude toward them. I learned that there is a thriving underground of psychedelic therapists. These are serious professionals, but they're doing something legal. And I was able to find my way into this community, and after interviewing several of them, I found a couple people I felt comfortable enough to entrust my mind to. This isn't doctors giving you a pill and sending you out into the world. You are, for a period of 4 or 5 hours, in a room that's decorated like a kind of cozy den or study. You're lying down on a couch, you have eye shades on, and headphones, which are playing a very carefully curated playlist to make you go inside, to have an internal experience. And you're with 2 guides at all times. Some people are put in touch with childhood trauma. Some people have encounters with death, and I mean, it can be very dark. But with the help of the guides, you use that material and try to understand it. So after the session, you always come back the next day and have what's called a period of integration, where the guides, who are therapists, trained therapists, help you interpret what happened and figure out ways to put it to good use in changing your life. My best journey was a fairly high-dose psilocybin journey that I had with a guide. What was stunning about it was I did have an experience of complete ego dissolution. I reached a point where I myself just kind of fell apart into these little pieces of paper Post-its that just got scattered to the wind, and I saw myself. And I know that sounds weird, who's the I that saw myself? But there is this split in consciousness that happens. But I saw myself scattered to the wind, but I was all right with it. And I learned a really important lesson in that moment, which was that I'm not identical to my ego.
All right, folks, if you are just tuning in to CHLY 101.7, this is Cassandra, your host for the day on A Sound Constitution. We just finished hearing from Michael Pollan with The Healing Power of Psychedelics. Michael is an American author and journalist who is currently the Knight, now Knight with a K, Professor of Science and Environmental Journalism at the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. Michael Pollan has a few books out there as well on the topic, one of them being How to Change Your Mind, so be sure to check him out. Lots of information there. This episode's been so much fun producing and researching content for. Thank you all for listening to CHLY 101.7 with the Sound Constitution. My name is Cassandra, and earlier you were hearing from my co-host Karla. If you missed today's show at all or want to listen to it again, be sure to check out our YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram pages, as all of our episodes will be posted on there. This is also a great place to share some feedback or comment on topics you'd like to talk about. Again, all of our information provided here today is for educational purposes and does not replace the advice from your regular healthcare provider. So again, thank you for tuning in to CHLY 101.7 FM radio.